All right, everyone, welcome back. I am your Ice Dragon Rayron here today. I got another book for you. So this one is not technically manga. It is more kind of a printed copy of what the pop culture community would say as webtoon. Definitely a little bit different art style. I'm not gonna compare this to manga because it's kind of a different animal and breed. It's kind of like comparing apples and oranges a little bit. But there are some things I kind of want to talk about when it comes to this particular book here. This is a Heavy Metal Sailor Moon. Like we've got an excerpt in the back here. We'll go ahead and take a look at it here. All right. So plagued by dreams she can barely remember. Suki is an ordinary young woman scrapping by in the world. A falling star and a group of terribly strong warriors show Suki that the life she led was merely a shadow of a destiny she had forsaken. Now armed with the power she did not want, Suki is Sailor Moon, guardian of the solar system, under the guardian of the timeless guardian Saturn. Moon faces a menace that corrupts by mere touch and threatens the life as she knows it. However, Indie Moon, the Prince of Earth, whispers in her ear that there can be another way, then complete and utter destruction. Who can Moon trust? How can she move forward? And then this is based off of the adaptation of the Sailor Moon manga. So this is really interesting because this is the first book I want to kind of describe it as. Because again, I want to say manga, but it's not really manga. It's a webtoon inspired design. And this is kind of the first book I reviewed on the channel that is fan fiction in my definition. Again, probably not exactly the correct definition, but heavily inspired by an independent author. Down here, as you can see, Minerva Fox. Again, I apologize if I butchered that name, but definitely interesting. This is independent. So when it comes to the story, I kind of want to talk about the definition here of heavy metal. Now, when I look heavy metal in a dictionary, it comes with two different types of definitions. One is any metal with a specific gravity of 5.0 or greater, especially one that is toxic organisms as lead, mercury, copper, cadmium, which is interesting, and an aggressive and heavy amplified rock music commonly performed by groups that wear spectacular or bizarre costumes. So, with those definitions in mind, it kind of gives inspiration when it comes to this particular story. So, when it comes to the costumes, it's not your prototypical Sailor Scouts. It's not like the cutesy, artsy type of sailor suits that you would normally think of when you think about Sailor Moon. It is definitely the best I can say it is. It's not really bizarre, but it's definitely heavily inspired by rock or the heavy metal music because you got these interesting costumes that are bizarre, not stereotypical, very to the point, very. It's really hard to describe it, but you can kind of see here on the outfit here that it's not your typical kind of outfit. So it's interesting inspiration. But I'm not going to go too much into details with this. I don't necessarily want to spoil it, but I do want to give a spoiler warning if you guys don't want to get spoiled. With the main plot line, which I'm going to talk about and highlight, then feel free to watch this video after you get this particular book, which I'll leave the link down below, considering that it is an independent author. I do want to support independent creators, and that's why I purchased this book. Definitely more on the expensive side. However, you got to take things into context. So, when it comes to the manga books, to webtoons, most of these products and books and stories are mass produced, being able to drive the cost down. Whereas when it comes to independent artists, they have to fund everything from start to finish, from creation to drawing to publication of the book. So they have to do it all independently. With that in mind, I typically can't really compare the cost. It's up to you guys what you define your value as when it comes to independent artists. What are you willing to pay for? I can only give it from a retail perspective. When it comes to independent, usually I pay a little bit more for it because I want unique creative stories. And this particular story is definitely unique to say the least. So, again, spoilers. But with that, we'll go ahead and take a look at the chapters here when it comes to this particular book. Actually, there's no table of contents, so I apologize. There's no table of contents in here, but each act has their own unique art style that the author has created, which is awesome. I wish, though, one kind of critique is that I wish I could have seen more art form for the entire frame of the comic. Some of these are actually pretty well drawn, use as much of the canvas for the little sections, but there are some sections I wish that could have been a little bit more detail. But again, this is all about independent artists, so you can imagine you got to balance out time and production and so forth. So um, again, small little nitpick there. But when it comes to the story, so let's talk about it. The best I can say to this is that think about Marvel's what if. So, we're so used to, again, to put this into Marvel terms, because that's really the best way I can describe what's going on here, is that um, you've got in the Marvel universe, you basically have this golden timeline. Now, I know this comes from Loki, which again is not the greatest, but it's the best way I can really talk about this particular book. So you got this golden timeline. So my golden timeline, again, this is 100% subjective when it comes to this. My golden timeline is the Sailor Moon from the 90s. That's what I grew up with. That was pretty much the solid timeline that I knew of. And then you got your multiverse essentially. So think of it as, you got the manga editions that is an adaptation from Crystal. So you got those different timelines. This one is definitely what I would say a different universe, different timeline when it comes to Sailor Moon. So what's interesting about this is that in our golden timeline, if that's how we want to define it, for the sake of this review, I'm just going to use in reference to the 90s, that Queen Serenity, when she was under attack from Queen Beryl, she had to use her own power to defeat Queen Beryl, but then also send all of our Sailor Scouts back to Earth. And that's pretty much a solid event that happens within the Sailor Moon timeline. Crystal has it that way. The manga kind of has it that way. They just go a little bit more detail into it. But this one takes an interesting spin. This was, what if instead of Queen Serenity was able to defeat Queen Beryl and some of our Sailor Scouts back, this has the interesting twist of Queen Serenity asked Sailor Saturn to basically, because she is the Sailor Scout of Death, to basically wipe everyone off the Moon Kingdom to prevent evil from spreading to the planets and so forth. And so from that aspect, from that simple change, it pretty much diverted from our quote-unquote golden timeline to create a different multiverse. Again, I am analyzing, trying to bring it into context what this story is. Again, this story didn't really expand upon that this is a different universe within the writing. This is just me trying to explain from a normie standpoint from Sailor Moon, and as a fan of the manga from the anime and so forth, what this is trying to do. So we have a different timeline where Sailor Moon is not awakened by Luna at this point. Again, the story will explain what happened there. And instead, Saturn, trying to deal and cope with the events of her actually executing her mission from what Queen Serenity does, and then eventually Sailor Saturn becomes the leader of the Scouts, and you can see kind of the timeline that is created because of that. Definitely a very interesting twist to Sailor Moon. Originally I wasn't sure if I liked this book or not. When I got halfway through it, I was definitely against what was going on. But then, in the back of my head, got to read the story all the way through just to get the beginning, middle, and end. And by the end of it, it kind of wrapped everything up. One of my biggest critique about this particular book is that I wish we could have seen the fight of the Moon Kingdom between Queen Beryl and Queen Serenity at the very beginning to set up the world, to set up the dynamic, because not gonna lie, as a Sailor Moon fan, starting this was a little bit rough because I have this preconceived world and narration, again coming from the golden timeline in Sailor Moon. But reading it through, the author was able to bring us into what was going on with the world and how did everything come to be. And by the end of it, I was satisfied with this timeline. again, it definitely interesting to say the least. Some things that I want to caution normie Sailor Moon fans, always known as Moonies, is that this is definitely a twist on things. Again, it's called heavy metal for a reason. It is amplified. It is not common. It is bizarre. Those type of frames. Again, we go back to the definition that I said earlier, and this is not your normal Sailor Moon that you're used to. There's a lot of cursing in this. There's a lot of adult themes in here. There's a lot of like real life situations in here, and it's just things that you would not expect a Sailor Moon story to be. So, going into this story again, keep an open mind about it, um, and read it to the very end, because there are some parts that you may get angry at, but it actually wraps up nicely by the end of it. So, overall, after reading through the entire book, and actually, if you take it from the perspective that this is a different universe, again, that golden timeline that Loki introduced in the Marvel universe, if you apply that here, but better writing and better just storytelling overall, I'm actually liking this book because, Sailor Moon is one of my favorite franchises of all time, and seeing a different spin on it is interesting. It opened my eyes a little bit more to this, but again, definitely different. And it's interesting that one pivotal moment in the storyline can change the direction of how things go. So, again, I don't want to go too much into it. I just want to give you guys a general idea of what this is about. And again, if you keep an open mindset, think about it as a what if perspective, from like the Marvel universe, but better. Then I do recommend this. But again, it's not the common Sailor Moon stories that you guys are used to. But yeah, I'll show you kind of a quick excerpt of this. So it's like you can see kind of how the art style is. Again, I wish I could have seen more detail on the face to make it have more depth. But the writing is not bad. It got the story across. Again, I just wish that certain things in here were placed at different sections of the book. But yeah, again, independent creator, author, and so I would recommend it. There is the digital copy of this, which is a little bit cheaper, and then you've got the physical copy, which I always love my physical copy because then I can actually read it on the bed and so forth, and it's just much easier for me to read, especially from the eyes perspective. But yeah, guys, that is pretty much my snapshot kind of overview of Heavy Metal Sailor Moon. I enjoyed it. Again, you got to read it from beginning to end because it wraps up the story nicely. And yeah, guys, with that, I will see you on the next video.